Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, here we go. Another year of Rebel Force Radio, the weekly podcast underway. 2025, here we are. So great to be back with you here on the weekly podcast. Now, we have most of us, I like to think most of us, have been together over the last couple of weeks throughout the holidays with the Skeleton Crew after shows. If you haven't joined, those are all available, including this week's big season finale. They're all available on YouTube and, of course, on the Rebel Force Radio website and the podcast feed. You know what? I've come to the conclusion that no matter what you think of the show itself, the after shows are always great. They're always a great time. And even when things, the conversation turns towards, this didn't really work for me, we still find a way to celebrate Star Wars, kind of hold each other up, as fans, and sometimes just laugh at things. But in the case of Skeleton Crew, there was just good vibes and good times, I think, all around. Appreciated the story, the characters, all that. So hopefully you were on the ride with us for all of that. And again, if not, you can check it out all in the archives. This week, wow, coming out into 2025 with Star Wars rumors. Yeah, Star Wars rumors are really, really heating up. Is there going to be a season 2 of Skeleton Crew? And what's going on with AHSOKA? And what's going on with Grogu and Mando? And all of that. And so we're going to give you a kind of a rundown of those rumors and tell you what we think, and try to separate the fact from the more fictional. Also, speaking of AHSOKA, big news. There has been a replacement for actor Ray Stevenson. So Baylan Skoll, the character, lives. We have confirmation of that. We'll be talking about that. Skeleton Crew still very fresh in our minds. And we're going to be checking in with Jaleel White from Skeleton Crew and getting his comments on what the experience was like. Also, director James Mangold talking about a little bit about his future in Star Wars. And finally, Diego Luna, Andor. That's the next big thing we can look forward to from Disney Plus, season 2 of Andor. He's got some comments. He was talked to, I think, at the Golden Globes recently. So anyway, chock full of Star Wars goodness. We are your source for the Force and so much more here at Rebel Force Radio. If you found us through the after shows, and you're new to the weekly podcast, and introductions may be in order, my name is Jason, and with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Back for the weekly RFR in 2025. We're outside the window of wishing people Happy New Year. Okay, we know this.
According to Larry David, that's true. Yes.
Right. We've seen enough episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm to know that I think it's a 7-day window. I saw I saw Babu Freak Barry Harmon over this past weekend, and he said Happy New Year to me, and I said, Barry, I'm sorry, the window is closed on that. There's really no response I can give you right now. I have to shun your New Year's greetings.
Wow.
So I shunned the New Year's greetings.
You shunned it.
It is something that Larry David definitely made a point of promoting, that there's a window that closes 1 week after New Year's. So you don't say Happy New Year's to anyone.
And it doesn't matter whether you haven't seen the person. It doesn't matter. What February 2nd, you see somebody, you're going to wish them a Happy New Year?
Exactly.
No. It's madness.
Exactly. So we're following those rules here on RFR. So it's not Happy New Year, but it's going to be a great new year with RFR. And we got a lot of stuff going on as we look forward to Andor in a few weeks. And, of course, there's going to be a big Star Wars whoop-de-doo out in Japan where I'm sure some news will break. And I'm sorry if we accept some of those news blasts coming out of Japan with a bit of skepticism, maybe a little cynicism, because we've known so many of those Star Wars Celebration announcements made by Kathy Kennedy don't come to fruition. So we'll see what they're trying to get their shareholders excited by, because the fans don't matter. They'll string us along and get us excited over stuff, get us pumped up over things that never happen. So that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it didn't used to be that way. I mean, when we would go to conventions back in those days of the prequels coming out, man, if Steve Sansweet announced something from the stage, you could take it to the bank.
Yeah.
Always.
Certainly. But things are different now, and we live in a different age where communications are driven by technology, and as a society, we all react to that. But all I care about is how Jason reacted to his Star Wars film marathon that he was going to put himself through over the holidays. I wonder if he watched all 9 films of the proper saga, or if he watched any films at all. Now, I've heard you drop a few hints on the Skeleton Crew after show.
Yeah.
So I know you have been watching Star Wars films, but what's the tally?
What's the tally? 6. So I watched the Lucasian era. The 6.
Okay.
And things just kind of spiraled a little bit at the end of the holiday break. And I wasn't snubbing the sequel films at all. But one of the big motivations for me in watching these was that a couple of years ago, I got the big 4K box set. And I feel like a 4K disc in terms of home video is the gold standard. It's the best that you can get. Even better than the streaming because of the consistency in the spinning of the disc and all of that. So I really wanted to see all 6 of these films in their entirety as they look on 4K. I knew the sequel films were going to look great because I've seen them on 4K. I saw them when they were all originally released on 4K. So that was part of this exercise. But also just to kind of, it's good to sort of recommit yourself as a fan. And coming out of 2024, it was a bit of a rocky year. And so for me, bathing in the waters of the original trilogy in particular and the prequels, really, I find it really, really cathartic, helpful, and I recommend it to anybody because it does remind you sometimes of why we care so much, why Star Wars matters so much. I came away with some observations. The one I'll tell you is, and it's tropey, but I've never felt it so passionately than I do right now, is I absolutely hate the special edition stuff, the stuff that was added for the Blu-ray and the stuff that was added for the 4K. And I'll tell you why. And it's mainly with A New Hope, because when I watch that movie on 4K, it feels like you're watching movies that were shot in 4 different eras. It's so inconsistent. It's so inconsistent. I mean, where it really fell apart for me was when the droids and Luke and old Ben were kind of circling around Mos Eisley, because George really wanted to show how populated it was. He didn't like that. I'm telling you, dude, it looks like an animatic from a video game from like the late 90s, early 2000s. It's horrible. It's horrible. And when it's in 4K and you're coming out of this beautiful widescreen, gorgeous shot of them actually there in Tunisia, standing overlooking at Mos Eisley, the wretched hive of scum and villainy, and then you see the little speeder going around, and it's just... it really does not do the movie any justice. And I think it's a big I really think it's a big problem, you know, as far as film history and really being able to see the film. And I don't even just talk about from like a pure standpoint. I'm just talking about from a visual consistency. You're just being jerked around with different lighting aesthetics and just all kinds of things, and it exposes it. I think when you're watching it in a higher definition.
Interesting.
That's one, and then even though the films themselves in 5 and 6, they match the added special tweaks. They match a little bit better than A New Hope, and you're not kind of being pulled out. But it really does, I think, break the rhythm of those movies. The pacing, it gets very clunky. We've talked about some of these things before. You know, Vader, leaving Cloud City to get back up on the Star Destroyer because George thought we weren't smart enough to figure out how he got there. You know, and I love George. You know, but I think it's a case of overthinking in many ways.
Yes,
so
yes.
I came away from watching the original trilogy, really not liking those effects. The Jabba scene. Here's something I never really noticed so much about the Jabba sequence in A New Hope, is that the dialogue is damn near word for word the same conversation he has with Greedo.
That's why he cut it out of the film in the first place.
Right.
Because, it's just reiteration.
Yeah.
To me, I was so excited when the special editions were released back in 97. It was the first time I ever saw cosplayers in my life at the movie theater.
Yeah.
It's probably the first time I ever saw cosplayers in my life. And I was geeking out about that and just the excitement of going back to the theaters to see Star Wars again. Because you have to understand, Star Wars up until 1997 was long considered to be dead and gone. It was something that was put up on the shelf in the cupboard and the door was closed shut on it. And then it started to creep back into at least the fandom via the novels and the Dark Horse comics, the rise of Star Wars Insider magazine. All of a sudden, trading cards were starting to appear. Kenner, then Hasbro, restarted the action figure line in 1995. So
total renaissance. Renaissance.
It was a Star Wars renaissance. But yet, it was largely off the mainstream radar up until the special editions were released. And the big shock of the special editions is they all went to number 1 in the box office rankings for each individual film once they were released. And nobody saw that coming. And so it was like, wow, Star Wars fever, while it's been dormant for a long time, still exists. And is still a force to be reckoned with. But as time, and it was so exciting to see those additional tweaks in the theater because it was fresh Star Wars. It was the first time we were seeing live action, new additions to the saga that had been, the original trilogy at that point had been memorized by so many fans who were kids when they were released, now young adults. And I was in that mix and very pumped up about it. But it was instantly controversial mainly because the Han Solo Greedo scene was very clumsily tweaked.
Oh, dude. And the McClunky, it's been several years since I've actually watched the McClunky scene. It is brutal. It looks like a mistake when you're watching it. It really does. It looks like some sort of weird slip of the edit controls. It's the beat doesn't make sense. It's truly terrible. It's truly terrible.
It's nonsensical. Yeah. Why add an extra beat there before you get to the very jarring recreation of Greedo shooting, Han shooting at the same time? That particular scene has been sheer madness since it
Total.
dropped. It's just been total insanity. The fact that any of this weirdness has actually occurred with that scene. However, I will say on the whole, as I look back at the special editions, I appreciate the tweaks that were made to the existing scenes outside of the Greedo thing. But more specifically, when you talk about the trench run, the trench run was very exciting and amazing visually in the 70s. But by the time you got to the 90s, it looked pretty blocky. You could practically see the strings, you know? It was there was something that just was very static, very just not working with it. And the enhancements that George made to that particular sequence, I still think are really great for the most part. The X-Wing reveal is something that people don't really understand when I tell them that in 1977, when I was sitting in the theater and they said lock S foils in attack position and the ships were all lined up in a straight row and one after another, the wings split in half and they became the X-Wings.
Right.
I didn't see that coming the first time I saw Star Wars. And it floored me that happened. It just, for some reason, the mechanics of it all or whatever.
They look so badass when they go into the X formation, yeah.
It was just, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was used to planes with two wings and these starfighters looked pretty damn cool already. And then they took it up a notch that way by splitting the wings and making them X-Wings. I'm telling you, when I saw Star Wars the first time, I had never heard the term X-Wing. Okay. So I couldn't even like rationalize it. It just, when it happened, it shocked me. And that's something fans of today will never understand. But being there in the earliest days of Star Wars and seeing that happen, just, it floored me. And I was so blown away by that. Then with the special edition, they have way more X-Wings and they're all sort of scattered about in the shot. They're not lined up perfectly like they were in the original cut. And so having that sentiment, being blown away by seeing the X-Wings put their ships into attack position for the very first time, I've never forgotten that feeling. And so when I looked at the special edition, I was like, oh, they ruined that shot with the X-Wings. And then there were some other complaints I had too about the way the sounds were mixed, because there are certain times when the volume of the John Williams soundtrack music would pump up into the forefront of the mix. And that added a lot of excitement to the sequences. But when they remixed the entire special edition, some of those little nuances were lost. And
I have a friend who is a big movie soundtrack nut, loves film soundtracks, huge fan of John Williams. And Jim, I know the great Ben Burt, you're a big fan of his, pioneer, genius, but this buddy of mine, he gets so pissed. He thinks that Ben Burt buries the John Williams score in moments of the films, to kind of put his effects, a little bit more in the foreground. And so I wonder if that's some of the, because he's got a few years on you, so even more more grown up when he saw the originals in the theaters, and they made such an incredible mark on him. But man, if you bring up Ben Burt to him, he is just like, that guy, and he just buries Williams' masterpiece in the mix, and blah, blah, blah. So
that's what they make CDs and albums for, my friend.
That's true.
That's all I would say to him.
The changes that they made to the trench run, for whatever reason, they don't jump out at me as much. Maybe it's just that I don't. Maybe that particular scene was. I'm a lot more of a character guy, and so as a kid, that scene was just like, I was kind of waiting to get through it, just to get the characters back on Yavin and celebrating and all of that. Not that I didn't care about it, but it wasn't like I had it memorized to the extent that I had a lot of the other sequences and scenes. So some of those I don't even notice. But when you just mentioned the X-Wings all lined up, you triggered a memory. So I'll be reaching for either my Grindhouse cut or my despecialized edition to check that out, because I have both of those. And in fact, I was so I don't want people to think that this at all was a negative experience. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I was cozied up on the couch and I had a few beverages, and it was late at night and the whole family was in bed. That's my time, when everybody else is in bed and I can watch what I want. And I really, really loved it. But, some of it was, I was in a place, it was holiday time, you're feeling nostalgic. And I think that kind of put me at odds with some of the newer stuff a little bit. And again, I'll say, and you brought up the mix, I noticed, especially with A New Hope, I don't hear it with Episode 5 and Episode 6, or even see it as much, is the inconsistencies and how things dip. And you can tell that they're dealing with like different cuts and what, which they were. So, I mean, yes, they were dealing with different cuts and different mixes, but it's so much more obvious with Ep4. So I don't know if anybody else out there listening has had a similar experience, but they're masterpiece films. Empire Strikes Back, moment for moment. It's not just a great Star Wars film. It's to me, it's the Wrath of Khan of Star Wars, where it's just a fantastic movie, like a near perfect. I'll say it. No, it's a perfect movie. I think The Empire Strikes Back is a perfect film. There's not a second that is wasted in that movie. Not a second. And the dial, everybody gives, the I love you, I know scene so much attention. Oh, they got little mugs and matching shirts. The best line in that whole movie between Han and Leia is, she goes, being held by you, Captain Solo, being held by you is not enough to get me excited. And he goes, we don't have time for anything else, I mean, that is the best. I think that's the best Han Leia moment. We don't have time for anything else. I mean,
that's the moment.
It's so much
right
better than I love you, I know. Yeah.
That was the moment before the big kiss.
Right,
Here's something to put things in perspective. I remember anticipating Empire Strikes Back and seeing the early artwork for the film, movie posters, whatever, and it was very obvious that, especially in that Gone with the Wind type poster that they had, that Han and Leia were going to be very romantic in this film. And me being, I was like 12 years old, the testosterone was kicking in hard. It's like, oh God, they're going to make Star Wars some sort of soap opera romantic flick. I was really like having anxiety about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought it was going to make Star Wars too soft or something. But then I saw the film and perfectly fell in line with the storytelling and everything. But I recall, telling friends as we were anticipating the opening of the Empire Strikes Back, I said to him, hey, I think there's going to be a good bathroom break moment in this film, and that's when Han and Leia have their little romance, It's like, I don't need to see all that. I was still, kind of like, girls are icky, maybe. I don't know.
It's funny. It was like girls weren't icky. It just, they were kind of, like sucky guys. Like they were just less, like they just weren't as fun as the guys. And that doesn't, that didn't last long. But
no, God,
I think that was part of how we felt in the evolution.
It was just being a boy,
Of course.
It was just being a boy.
Of course.
And yeah. My priorities definitely shifted.
One other observation I'll just throw out about the original trilogy is that, Mark has been teased. Mark Hamill's been teased, and he's kind of kidded himself about, he was the guy on the set that really wanted to know, what's next for my character, and tell me more, George, and tell me more. And I'm glad that Mark was so persistent in that, because his evolution from beginning of A New Hope to the end of Return of the Jedi is absolutely a tour de force. His performance and the way he changes the character, from his mannerisms to the way he talks, everything, he nails it. He nails character arc, hero's journey. He is it personified on the screen. Nothing comes close. No Frodo Baggins, no Samwise Gamgee, no Marvel film. Nothing comes closer to the absolute manifestation of the hero's journey than Mark Hamill's performance in those three movies. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I look at it, I see exactly what you're talking about. But again, in the 80s, when I was a teenager, an early teenager, I felt disappointed that Luke didn't have that enthusiasm anymore by the time Return of the Jedi rolled around.
He was too serious?
I felt like
for you, maybe?
He was too serious. I felt like they ruined the character. Now, I mean, I'm talking, retrospectively.
Right.
I understand the arc.
This is how
and I agree.
13-year-old
with what
Jimmy
you
Mack
said.
felt, right?
Yeah. For some reason, I'm applying like my original viewings of this to your. I mean, how many times have you seen these films? 5,000 times at this point. But for some reason, I feel compelled to offer my early days of Star Wars fandom, and because you almost always go back to the feelings you felt when you saw these movies the very first time.
Yeah.
That really sort of sets the bar for me. And that's why, I mean, Rebel Force Radio has been so great, because our opinions, especially with the sequel era and the streaming shows, that's all like locked in now. And like forever, there's a historical document, detailing exactly what we were thinking and feeling when we saw some of these new Star Wars stories for the very first time. So it makes me actually feel like, well, I have to then preserve the feelings I felt when I saw the original trilogy for the first time. And the best way to do that is through these recollections. And I felt like Luke had lost, there was like an energy that had been removed from him, or a relatable quality that I felt as a young kid or as a young teen. Yeah. Even by the time Return of the Jedi rolled around, I wanted the Luke who was a little bit more bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and everything. Because when Han started like busting on Luke, he does it a little bit at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. It doesn't have the same vibe.
No.
When he calls Luke kid and everything, it's like, wait, Han. Luke has been through a lot, okay? You don't know this. But we do. And even him, even Han, like jumping back into how their relationship was prior to Return of the Jedi. I mean, he falls right into, he doesn't know what's been going on. He's been hibernating essentially. And Luke's been through a lot. And it just felt like, Han doesn't know this. And I kind of feel like Han. I want old Luke. I want to.
Not as fun as you were, kid. Jeez.
Yeah, geez, kid, what happened to you? You become a Jedi, and what'd you do with the lightsaber? What'd you do? Put it up your ass? No. That's a deleted scene. So Jedi and the Luke hero's journey really became solidified, I believe, by the end of that film. And then when you look at the growth of the character, the arc he goes on in the original trilogy, I agree with you. It's real perfection.
Yeah.
I mean, he suffers loss along the way. It changes everything about him to his core. And that's the whole point of it.
Right.
I'm sitting there, where's young bushy-tailed, bright-eyed Luke Skywalker? I really enjoyed him because I was relating to him.
Yeah.
Luke had gone through his hero's journey by the end of Return of the Jedi, and I was just, as far as life goes, just starting my hero's journey. So there was a relatability factor that slipped away from me somehow. And it's almost like, man, it sucks to get older.
Yeah, well, the one thing I'll say is, you were the older brother, and in my case, I was the younger brother. And there's 4 years difference between my brother and I. And when I was 12 and he was 6, up until the point he was about 16, I felt like we were bros, we were buddies. And then he hits 16, he gets a driver's license, he gets a job, and I'm like, where's that cool guy I used to like to hang with, you know? But he matured, you know, and he went on to bigger things. Then, you know, a few years later, then we related to each other again. So, you know, I think that happens in real life, right? And
for sure
with Luke. Just to button this up, what can I say about the prequels other than we've said this many times on the show, like fine wine, they truly get better with every viewing. And I think they are. I think they've already reached the point where they are classics. They're classics. Oh, and you know what really surprised me is how memeable they are. You know, like as memeable as the original trilogy is, and there's so many iconic lines. There's a ton of iconic moments and iconic lines in the prequels that you don't think about until you rewatch them, and you're like, "Oh, there's a meme. There's a meme." You know, so that really shocked me. As we'll use the Kyle Newman term, how much of the prequels have over the last 25 years have seeped into the zeitgeist, the cultural zeitgeist, and so I think that's proof.
It truly has. And it was a while ago I had a conversation with Michael, who's in his mid-20s now, and I was asking him about how guys his age, who were kids when the prequel trilogy was getting released, how do they relate to that story? Do they like it? Is it something that he's still considers himself a fan of and all of that stuff? And he immediately said, it's the memes. The memes have really done a lot to drive home the prequel trilogy via the Gen Zers and the millennials, etc. He noted that right away, the memes. And I'm like, this is so fascinating. I have to have you on the show at some point talking about this. And you know how things slip and slide.
The memology.
He never did.
Star
It never
Wars,
happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely said the memes really fuel a lot of the love for the prequel trilogy. And I mean, that's just a sign of the times, you know. For us, it was like buying action figures and saving them and, you know, maintaining our collections and things like that. Well, kids don't really collect like we did. But what they do is they absorb all of this internet culture. Yeah. And we didn't have that. So the only way we could connect with Star Wars was on the physical realm via the collectibles or purchasing the films and the soundtracks and all of that stuff. But nowadays it's the internet culture that really fuels Star Wars. We had toys, they have megabytes, you know. It's a different sort of scene, but yet it still is very important to keep Star Wars alive and vibrant, and each generation is going to do it the way that's appropriate for their generation. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's a great time. If you have the opportunity, grab yourself a disc and put it into a player, because the intentionality of sitting down with it, as opposed, it's great to be able to pop it on your iPad or your phone, have it in the background, comfort food, all of that. But give yourself an opportunity to put everything aside, grab the disc, put it in the player, sit back, and just watch. It is a different experience.
It feels more of a commitment.
It does.
If you're putting the physical media into the machine. Plus, you get access to all those cool menus and stuff. It's a lot of fun. And other things will pop up on the screen for you to click on. And they'll be like, oh, what's this little documentary feature at? I'm going to give this a spin. And then you go down that rabbit hole. Yeah. And it's always
commentaries, all that stuff. Yeah. All right. Let's, you've heard us enough. You want to do a voicemail? See what people are talking about?
Well, I just, I was watching some Star Wars too over the break. I do want to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you watch? What did you?
Well, I'm
Skeleton Crew. That's a given, Skeleton Crew. But
it was Skeleton Crew that launched me into the direction of some Star Wars that I don't think I really gave a fair chance to. Oh, what I'm saying is that I watched the 6th and 7th episodes of Skeleton Crew with Michael and Wendy. And they're loving it. You know, they just love Skeleton Crew. A little late to the party, but they loved it.
They got on board.
But speaking of late to the party, I watched those 2 episodes with Michael and Wendy, and then they split. And so I was left alone with the TV set, and I was just in the right frame of mind, mentally, emotionally, and yes, chemically. And it was, and I had an evening with Star Wars Visions 2, which is something I never gave a fair shake to. A collection of 9 15-minute long animated self-contained stories about Star Wars characters you've never heard of. They're all unique and individually crafted for these specific stories. And I watched Star Wars Vision Season 1. I thought it was okay.
Right.
Originally.
Right. We even did an after show, I think, on that one.
Yeah, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
But then when Visions 2 launched in 2023, I don't know what it was. I wasn't in the proper mindset to soak up another season of Visions, or I developed some sort of bias toward it, or animus even. Feeling like maybe Star Wars should be focusing on making Star Wars according to the existing template and not trying to tap into all of this international flavor for whatever reason. But I put Visions 2 on. I watched the first episode. And the first episode even took me about halfway through the episode to really kind of suck me in. But it sucked me in.
Yeah?
And I thought, I watched the entire season in one sitting and thought each individual episode is something of a masterpiece. And
wow.
it was such an interesting thing to experience. I really think Skeleton Crew helped open up my mind to this idea of getting away from a lot of these established characters and storylines and situations and just dropping myself into like an individual standalone Star Wars story and just to give it a shot to see how it works. And I loved it. I mean, I am shocked, surprised at how much I enjoyed Star Wars Visions Season 2. And I just think like my head was in the right space. It was the right moment. But I remember as soon as it was done, I said to myself, I got to watch these again.
Wow.
You know, I had that pull to watch them all again.
It didn't feel like, okay, homework, done that, you know?
Right, exactly. I lost myself in Star Wars Visions 2, and now I'm suddenly really anticipating Star Wars Visions Season 3, which is supposed to drop this year.
Is there one?
And
is there one in Season 2 that you would say, okay, if you've been avoiding this might be the one that would hook you?
I would say, yeah, there's a few of them. Like the first episode, it's very bizarre at first, and then it gradually finds its way into a very, Star Wars like visual aesthetic and tone and theme. But at the beginning of that episode, it's vastly different than anything you've ever seen in Star Wars. But it just like, it shifts. And, maybe that first episode is the reason why I've been avoiding Visions all this time, is because it's so vastly outside the box. But then as the episode progresses, you find it becoming more and more familiar visually. It's hard to explain. But there's one in particular. I know a lot of people think Star Wars Visions is largely Star Wars anime. And it is, to a degree. But Visions Season 2 has more of an international flair to it. And there's one particular episode that I thought really was outstanding. And it was made by like an animation company. I want to just guess from India. And it was just outstanding. So I'm trying to pull up the list. I had it here of all the episodes just seconds ago. And
did any of these stories pick up on Visions 1, or were they all completely new? So
They're all standalone.
Okay. So that none of them are sequels to what we saw in the first season.
Mm-hmm. And each one of them just sucked me in to where I became fully committed to the characters. I became fully committed to the story. And then 15 minutes later, it was all over. Done.
Right.
On to the next one. And I liked it so much, I sat through all the credits because I wanted to hear the unique music that was created for each one of these. So, I mean, call me late to the party. I get it. You know, we never even really talked about Star Wars Visions.
We didn't.
Season 2. But for some reason, I don't know. You know, we watched these 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew. And then when he's like, I'm going to bed, Michael, I'm going up. And I said, hey, Michael, have you ever seen the Star Wars Visions? I wanted to show him the very first episode from season 1. It's black and white about a Ronin Jedi.
Yes, right.
And, you know, it had that Sith Lord. She had like this umbrella of red lightsabers. She'd spin around and stuff. It's really crazy. An R2 unit with one of those big hats that are like,
the Asian hat style. Yeah.
And so I wanted to show that to Michael. He's like, come on, man. I'm tired, man. I want to go to bed. I said, just watch for a second. I just to look at the style of this, just to kind of get the gist of it. He's like, yeah, okay. And he like nodded a couple times. Wendy's like, let him go upstairs to bed. I'm like,
all of a sudden, Wendy becomes Estelle Costanza yelling at Frank.
Serenity now! But she knows, you know, I've done so much to corrupt these children as far as making them Star Wars fans ever since they came out of the womb.
Now it's interrupting their sleep patterns.
Yeah. She if she senses that the kids are pushing back on Star Wars in any way, shape, or form, she's gonna pile on, man. She's gonna pile on. Finally, you know. So he split. And I was like, well, you know, there's a whole nother season of these shows. So I'm going to pop that on and see what happens. And I said, no matter what, you have to sit through one episode just to see. Because the thing that really has bugged me about a lot of people who are poo-pooing Skeleton Crew is the fact that a lot of them who are doing it haven't watched a single second of it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that, like, I believe there have been moments over the last couple of years where I might have said, you know, Star Wars Visions, why are they wasting their time on that? You know, judging it without actually seeing that second season. And now I did, and I'm so glad I did. I consider myself a fan, and I'm looking forward to Volume 3. So,
all right. Well, you certainly give, you know, if that is an endorsement to where I go, okay, next time I've got a little time. It's after hours, having a couple of adult bevies. I'll be like, put on that, put on that Visions and see what's going on.
Give it a shot.
And I love what you said about Skeleton Crew being sort of the trigger or the catalyst that you're like, yeah, you know what? There's something to this. Maybe going a little further out in the galaxy, or a little. Let's look at something different in the universe.
Exactly. And so I was so happy that I made that connection. I was like, wow, you know, this is great. What's next? I'm going to start watching Young Jedi Adventures. I don't know. And I've seen some episodes of that too. And it's so
I'm glad it's there for the little kids, you know.
It's so romper room, but you know, it still has its moments, you know.
Over the break, FJ DeSanto, he recently got a copy of the new Star Wars Encyclopedia, and he was sending us pictures of the some of the characters from Young Jedi Adventures, and see, they're canon. Look, they're canon. They're in the encyclopedia. FJ and his reference books, man, he loves those reference books.
So the one I was talking about that was made by the Indian animation company or whatever. The episode is episode 7, The Bandits of Golak. And just everything about that, it felt like 100% Star Wars.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was really digging it. It just had the right vibe. I think all of them did. But there's just some aesthetic things you got to get past, maybe at first, and just let the story unfold. In particular, like the last episode features these very like anime-inspired stuffed animals, or I don't know what to call them. Like I said, there's visual aesthetics that are so outside the box when it comes to Star Wars, but it doesn't matter. What matters more than anything is the story itself. And there's a theme throughout the entire season. It pops up here and there in various episodes that really highlight imperial oppression on the regular people throughout the galaxy. And that's something I really liked seeing being exposed in Bad Batch, where you see how, this empire is taking over the galaxy, and we know it's being fueled by a Sith Lord, and there's evil backing it all up and everything. But what about the regular people in the galaxy? What's happening to them? Beyond the Jedi, beyond the rebels, beyond all that stuff.
Yeah.
What's happening to guys just like us, And you see in this show how the Empire has this effect that creates all of this, these awful living conditions for people.
Yeah, Rebels did a really good job of that. I feel like right out of the gate, on Lothal, you got to see that, the stormtroopers roughing up the locals, and up to that point, that was something that we hadn't really seen. We'd seen oppression in Clone Wars, but it wasn't Imperial oppression. So sort of the rank and file of the galaxy and how they dealt with all of that.
Happy New Year!
It's a little late, frankly, for the Happy New Year's,
Why? Just happened a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, that's too long. Statute of limitations is kind of run out on the New Year's. 3 days. Plenty.
3 days.
Rebel Force Radio.
All right, let's see. We got a lot of news to go through, but let's do a voicemail.
We should do a voicemail.
Let's do a voicemail. It's been a while, so let's do it.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. It's Tanner from Denver, Patreon supporter. Just calling, wanted to say I absolutely loved all the Skeleton Crew after shows, and I agree. I don't think we should be dwelling on if we'll get a second season or not, but I think it's really important that we express to Lucasfilm the want to see these characters again in some way, shape, or form within Star Wars. Not through a comic, not through a book, but through, I want to see these actors back as their characters. So I wanted to ask you two who have insight, what is the best way to voice this to Lucasfilm? I know the viewing behind Skeleton Crew didn't necessarily match up to what they were hoping for, but how do we get vocal? How do we say it loud and say it proud that we're fans of these kids? Anyways, you guys have a great night. Love RFR, chut chut, and Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year. No. Good question. Jim, it seems as though, this isn't new, that when you hate something, you go online or you call the 800 number and you complain about it. But how many times have you bought something? Think about, you bought maybe a new mobile phone, or you got a new car and you absolutely love it. Do you ever write a letter to tell, the car manufacturer how much you love it or how much you love your new mobile phone? It's one of those principles. Everybody will rush to talk about how disappointed they are in something or how much they hate something. So our caller here, he wants to know, how do we do the opposite of that? How do we let Lucasfilm know, hey, we loved this. We really did, and we'd like to see more of it.
Well, see, the thing is, I think Lucasfilm is on board with Skeleton Crew. It's the Disney Corporation, the overlords, that really need to get the message. And I think the best way to do that is simply encourage the people in your life to watch the show. We need to get eyeballs on the show. And it's not too late to elevate the status of this show and make it something that will be obvious to the people at Disney that the story and the kids and Jude Law and all that has potential. Now, whether or not a season 2 will happen, whether or not a season 2 can even happen, that's the thing, because the kids are growing, how accepting are people going to be of adult Neil? What's the cuteness factor is removed from him? I don't know. I mean, he could be the next Zebarelius or the next Chewbacca or whatever, but I'm just saying that a lot of the charm, likability, and just sheer chemistry that the kids have with each other might not be so obvious as they get older. So I think it is important to get people to watch the show and improve those viewership numbers. That's probably the best thing to do, and sure, of course, social media is always there for you to say, watch Skeleton Crew.
But there's so much noise.
Simply.
There's so much noise.
There's a lot of noise.
I don't know how much they tune into that, but you're absolutely right. What they do pay attention to are numbers, streams, minutes streamed, and they're going to notice spikes, particularly in what's now considered catalog content, to where it's not the latest and greatest, the thing that they're pushing. So if people do discover this show, like I believe they've discovered Andor, we've heard people saying that something went on with Andor and it wasn't a huge viewer success initially, but word has spread over the last few years. And I think some are really expecting season 2 to do much, much better than season 1, at least in terms of the numbers. So I think they pay attention to that stuff, and it's, certainly helped Clone Wars. Stock rose on Clone Wars when it went to Netflix, and they saw just how popular it was. So I 100% agree. Watch it, rewatch it, do rewatches, and like Jim said, encourage your friends and your family to also sit down and watch it.
Because people who obviously like Star Wars and they have a fondness for the kid adventure films of the 80s, etc., they're going to like this show. But maybe they've been avoiding it because maybe they feel like it's been too much different series being spit out by Lucasfilm. I don't think that's the best approach to take with Star Wars, is just barfing out 3 series a year. It's just not the right way to do it. But I think that the kids as individual actors all have a future with Star Wars. I think Jude Law has a future with Star Wars. And it could be, they could reemerge in any story down the road. I think the greatest thing about Skeleton Crew is it's so beautifully self-contained as a story. You can watch it from beginning to middle to end, and you can have a very fulfilling experience. And if you never see the kids again, you never see the kids again. I brought up on the after show, it's based on Goonies, a movie which never had a sequel or a spin-off or anything, but yet remained beloved for all of these years and stands on its own. And maybe that's what Skeleton Crew will do. Be beloved for years and stand on its own. But the characters themselves and the story and the situation all have a future should Lucasfilm and Disney want to incorporate them in future Star Wars storytelling. Are you telling me that if Dave Filoni creates this film that is like a big gathering of all the story arcs that have been revealed in the Favreau-Filoni TV shows, are you telling me he doesn't want to have Jude Law in that movie? Of course he does. Of course he does.
Right.
So
what a
Skeleton
pop that would get in the audience. Can you imagine? Jod shows up, that'd be a big pop.
People will go nuts. So Skeleton Crew has a future. Whether it does as a second season or a standalone film, or just simply the characters and situations being expanded upon in other Star Wars stories, we'll have to wait and see. I would like to see a season 2, quite honestly, or maybe even a film. But we really need people to watch the show. That's the most important thing. Eyeballs on the show. And so that's what I would do. That's what I would do for sure. I'm not going to start organizing another write-in campaign. And I think, the write-in campaign we did
save
for
Skeleton Crew.
The write-in campaign we did for Clone Wars, I really think paid off, with the season 6 Lost Missions release and then season 7 all those years later. I think that was all really fueled by the fact that we just
didn't we mail
an avalanche of letters,
of voicemails, voicing their support of. Sent it right to Bob Iger.
Well, that's where you got to go because he's making the decisions. Him and his cronies are making the decisions on what gets the green light from Lucasfilm. Like Kathy Kennedy can green light things for Lucasfilm, but it doesn't become real until Disney gives it the green light. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I think a lot of projects have started up and installed out because of the House of Mouse, really, at the end of the day. So they're the ones who are saying stop or go. So more than Kathy. Yeah.
Hey, one more thing before we get into the news. Let's talk about, RFR weekly podcast may have been on holiday break, but the after show certainly wasn't. And RFR on Patreon wasn't on any kind of break. So, Jim, what's the latest and greatest on Rebel Force Radio's Patreon, the exclusive hub for Rebel Force Radio podcasts?
Well, the Q&A is back. The RFR Q&A is going to be dropping every week, early in the week. Late night Monday or midday Tuesday typically is when those shows get dropped. And we kick off 2025 with a great conversation with RFR VIP Jeff Holland. It's been a while since we heard from Jeff on the Q&A, and quite honestly, Jeff has been through a lot. He provided us with a very candid conversation about his recent bout with cancer, the big C, and the roller coaster ride that he went on to recovery. And it's really an excellent conversation, and will open your eyes to maybe your own personal health and best ways to maintain it. And it certainly got a lot of people talking in the on the comments section there. We have the greatest audience of Star Wars fans over on Patreon, and people are sharing with Jeff their family stories, maybe even personal stories about fighting sickness and disease, etc. And I think it's been really cathartic for Jeff to get that out in the open. And it's a story worth hearing. He's a great guy, and we do talk Star Wars. Don't get me wrong. As a matter of fact, Jeff ties it all in to his own sickness by presenting us with the top 8 worst sicknesses, diseases, and other maladies in Star Wars. So that's a list. That's a list you probably didn't see coming. But, it's through a positive attitude, through usage of humor and things like that. I think that really have benefited Jeff, and it's the focus determining your reality. And I think Jeff is on the other end of that terrible battle, but yet the battle continues, they have to keep a close eye on him for many, many years. And he's in good hands with his staff of doctors who take care of him, and I think he's going to beat this thing. We're totally rooting for Jeff Holland. So he's one of the real good guys, as they say in Skeleton Crew. And of course, the Babu Freaks have returned. The Babu Freaks are back for another year of wackiness on RFR on Patreon. Chicago area Star Wars fans who get their freak on once a month. And as we talk to the freaks, we look back at the year in Star Wars collecting, along with Skeleton Crew and a whole lot more. That's Babu Freaks number 45. And then, of course, RFR RPG is always happening. We're sitting down at the table with the great Matt Rashid, who's an RFR VIP extraordinaire. And he guides us along with the adventures of Podcastus, myself, and Grando the Grand, Tyler Page. And we are trapped on a derelict Imperial cruiser fighting against stormtrooper zombies and evil Night Sisters, and it's a hoot. So you want to check that out. RFR RPG on Patreon. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio is the place you want to go. Somebody was just asking me this week, how does this Patreon work? I want to get involved. Listen, just go to the website, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. And you can see that there's a group of tiers in which you can join that fit you best financially. Obviously, the higher the tier, the more you get as far as entertainment value goes. But any little bit helps. And even if you come in at the lowest tier, you're opening yourself up to this great community of Star Wars fans. I think the finest community of Star Wars fans anywhere on the internet. So check it out, poke around, and see if it works out for you. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right. So no sooner does the finale air, or stream as they say now, but we've got Watts and Ford, the creators of Skeleton Crew, talking to Entertainment Weekly about the finale. It's great to get this kind of immediate feedback from those guys. So, Jim, there were a number of quotes from this article that appeared online. Some revelations here, I think, from these guys, and they certainly leave the door open for future adventures.
Yeah, for sure. And there's just a few questions that I highlighted, a few questions and answers I highlighted, because I've been seeing people talk about it online. I've been hearing them talk about it on the after shows. And so it's always great to hear from the showrunners about what they were thinking about as far as producing the show and developing these characters. One of the things a lot of people have been talking about is Jod's past, his knowledge of the Force, and why didn't they provide a flashback, like showing us what happened to him in his youth, similar to the way they presented the Asajj Ventress flashbacks in the Clone Wars, when they showed her meeting up with the Jedi and getting trained in the ways of the Force. It's a very similar story to Jod's. Asajj and Jod basically share a very similar story about getting trained briefly in the Force and then watching the Jedi who was encouraging them and who took them under their wing get killed by the Empire. So, well, at least in Asajj's case, it wasn't the Empire. It was like separatists or whatever. But why no flashback? I saw somebody complain online saying, Jod explaining his backstory is akin to the greatest sin of storytelling. Show, don't tell. And it's like, well, wait a second, though. I don't know if that's how it works. It's show, don't tell when you're telling a story in the present sense. But when you're explaining things that provide the foundation for the story at hand, flashback over flashback over flashback, sometimes mere exposition does the trick. So it's not the cardinal sin.
No,
show, don't tell.
What was it, 4 lines? I mean, it wasn't a monologue. Truly, I mean, it was 4 lines that he said that gave him that backstory. It was powerful. It was impactful. Shows that he's damaged goods, but I mean, I don't know. I don't have to see a flashback. And, flashbacks are a relatively new thing in Star Wars.
That's right. That's right. But it doesn't break that rule, because the story is about the kids and the story is about Jod in the present sense.
Right.
How, whether he's a Jedi or not, how he learned these skills in the Force, that has no bearing on the story that's being told. All that matters is that Jod does use the Force, and he's been able to hoodwink these kids into thinking that he was a good guy. He's a pirate, and pirate's going to do what pirate's going to do.
And we were warned repeatedly by other characters in this show, from Kim to Pocket. They all told the kids, this guy, do not fall for it. Do not fall for it.
Even Cathalib said he smelled untrustworthy. So, I mean, if somebody smells untrustworthy, I mean, that, to me, that seals the deal. But so why no flashback? Because honestly, you know, I mean, fans aren't dumb. They're very much in tune with what the creatives are thinking. And obviously, it was thrown out there. Maybe we should show Jod, but they decided against that. And here's why. Christopher Ford explains it very clearly. He says, as fascinating as Jod is, we always wanted to keep it from the kids' perspective. The kids are like, I don't understand this guy. They've never been out in the galaxy and met someone as damaged as him. So I don't think we could have done a flashback in this season. So they're keeping the door open for maybe a flashback to show what happened to Jod in his youth in a future season. But, you know, these guys are still kind of banking on another season. They want it. They definitely want another season. John Watts says in this interview, we have ideas in our heads for sure, but we're waiting to find out what everyone else thinks. But we've always had an idea of where this could go even before we even made the first season. So there's lots of potential out there, and I hope everyone sees that. We wouldn't pretend like the kids are only 6 months older if we made more. It's fun to think of them growing up and where they would fit in the galaxy and how their world would be changed by the events of what happened in the first season. So they have ideas, you know, obviously, as they should. But a second season isn't set in stone, and fans are still licking the wounds from seeing Disney Plus strip away the Willow series from even being accessible, like mere months after the series wrapped up. And then, of course, we all know the Acolyte story, where it was a case of the second season being canceled a mere month after the first season dropped.
Yeah.
But I think that has a lot to do with the negative discourse that was going on online.
And let's face it, the PR tour of that show was a nightmare disaster. It just went from bad to worse. And to the point where they were barely even talking about Star Wars on those junket interviews. They talked about everything else but Star Wars, I thought.
Right. They almost felt compelled to cancel that show. And then obviously looking at the bottom line and seeing how much it all costs and stuff. It's like, no, we're not going to invest in this if it's just going to piss off a bunch of people and not provide the viewership numbers. Again, as we said, it all comes down to how many people are watching the show. And the fact of the matter is that the Acolyte underperformed. And so it was easy to cancel because people were so upset about it. And so it was more than just canceling a series. It was shutting up and shutting down the discourse, the negative discourse that was surrounding the Acolyte. Right or wrong, whatever you think, it doesn't matter. That's the fact. Those are the facts we're looking at, is that the discourse around the Acolyte was purely toxic, hateful, and horrible. And there were a lot of good points being brought up by certain people out there, but then there was this other nasty edge to a lot of it. And the Disney company is allergic to that sort of discourse.
Oh, yeah.
So the best way to shut it up is to cancel it, regardless of whether or not it's because it costs too much. The cost factor, along with the low viewership, made a cancellation possible. But then with the amplified hateful discourse surrounding the Acolyte, it made the Disney decision pretty easy for them, you know?
Right.
Now, with Skeleton Crew, it might be a different case. We've heard, number one, several cases of Disney executives saying that the viewership has been growing and they like the positive discourse that's been surrounding the show. It's not turning anyone off, you know? So I think there might be a little more leeway as far as the window of opportunity for a second season to occur.
Yeah.
As opposed to The Acolyte, where it was just like everyone's yelling and screaming. The show cost a fortune. It didn't result in the viewership numbers or the subscriber boost we wanted. Let's close the window on that and forget about it. But with Skeleton Crew, I think there might be a little more leniency because of the positive discourse that's been surrounding the show and the growing viewership numbers. From what we understand, it's been growing. I don't know how we'll ever find out for real.
That's the problem, is that, no one really has a ton of confidence in the numbers, the independents that go in there and try to look at what the numbers might be. Some people don't trust them. And then the numbers that Disney puts out there, for example, saying that it went to number 2 on their top 10 list. Well, what does that mean? I mean, that's it went to number 2 on the Disney Plus app.
Right.
I mean, it didn't have a lot of competition in terms of something brand new. So
right.
It's really hard. It's really hard to judge. And then there's the long tail. And then there's the other key metric that you mentioned, Jim, which is, does it drive new subscribers? And I've been reading recently in some of the trades that is increasingly becoming a more and more important number for these streaming companies. Is it driving new subs? Because once you're in the door, you're paying the $15-20 a month. It doesn't matter. It's all you can eat. So everyone's paying the same rate. The question is, are new people showing up? Are new people showing up? And it's hard. It's a hard thing to imagine that Mandalorian and the whole Star Wars catalog of films and things wasn't enough for a Star Wars fan to sign up for Disney Plus, but Skeleton Crew is going to get them to pay the $15 a month or whatever it is. That's a big leap for a show to be expected to increase subscribership when it's part of a franchise that is, in a lot of ways, kind of the whole part of the whole point of the platform to begin with. So I don't know how much growth to expect in terms of subscribership. I feel like all the really diehard Star Wars fans are there and they're already subscribing to Disney Plus.
Right. There you go. I mean, there's like young parents sitting around, they're counting their quarters and their pennies and stuff, and we have to get Bluey for the kids because they're going crazy. Well, I've been wanting Disney Plus forever because I'm a massive Star Wars fan, but we can't afford it. Yeah, but we have to get Bluey for the kids. All right, fine, let's do it then. I mean, at least I'll be able to watch Star Wars again. And then, so like what's motivating the decision to subscribe to Disney Plus in the first place? Is it to watch Bluey, or is it so the dad can watch Star Wars? I'm not really sure. I don't know how they measure that kind of thing outside of just pure viewership numbers.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. They should ask everyone who subscribes to Disney Plus, like, what are you doing this for? And then you type in, well, I want my Star Wars, damn it. But it's you want Bluey, right? You want Bluey. No, I want Star Wars. I promise you, I'll watch it.
Well, you bring up Bluey. I mean, you bring up Bluey. Bluey's a phenomenon, and it's a babysitter for a lot of kids. For their parents use it. That's also I said it a moment ago. Well, what competition does it have? And then you throw out Bluey, and I'm like, actually, Bluey's quite a bit of competition when you're looking at viewership hours and things like that. So, it's every time I think I start to understand the puzzle that is the streaming business model, I realize I don't know anything.
It's just the money, is outrageous that they spend on it. I don't care how much money they spend on it, but why for streaming? Why couldn't they do this for network television or cable television? Why did they hold off on creating really epic, huge looking television why did they wait for streaming? I don't understand. It's almost like streaming has taken the place of creating films.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that the value of the streaming service is really recognizable to anyone, because it's just become another place to create films more than anything. You have to ask yourself, would Skeleton Crew have been a big hit if Disney placed it on ABC or on the Disney Channel or on Netflix, where there's a larger amount of subscribers compared to Disney Plus? By just merely putting it on Disney Plus, it's almost like it's at a disadvantage, because that's far from being the largest platform out there. They might have been better off putting it on cable or on regular TV. It might have paid off in higher ratings. Who knows?
Yeah, there's a piece in Forbes, Jim, as you mentioned, the difference between the value proposition of a film versus streaming. This is Carolyn Reed, and Carolyn's been covering the streaming wars and Star Wars in particular for a while. And she says, studios have to try to make a profit on a production. They receive around 50% of the ticket sales of movies playing in theaters, as well as revenue from merchandise and home entertainment sales. Streaming shows are a much different story. Subscribers pay a flat fee to access all of the content on the platform. Advertising is sold on some subscription tiers, but none of the subscribers pay to watch each show, which makes it tough for even studios to say how much revenue, let alone profit, they can even generate or do generate. So it's not just hard for us to get our minds around it. As Caroline is pointing out here, it's hard for the folks running the services to get their minds around how profitable, how to even measure how profitable a streaming show is.
Yeah, I can't help but think they might have been way better off simply licensing this thing off to Netflix and watch the viewer numbers go through the roof. They get their cake and eat it too. It would just be perfect. You have to ask yourself, is it Star Wars? Is it the series? Or is it the actual streaming service itself that's kind of tampering the entire thing? Well, we'll never know.
Rebel Force Radio.
Star Wars.
What we do know is that the Star Wars rumors for 2025 have certainly hit hard and fast. It's been incredible, the avalanche of rumors about what's happening for the future of Star Wars. And some of these rumors have actually been verified through a number of sources. But here's what's going on the internet and elsewhere. For starters, the big news, Hayden Christensen will return in AHSOKA Season 2 with a expanded role compared to what he had in Season 1. So what we saw him in 3 episodes in Season 1, most notably in that World Between Worlds one that was right in the middle of the season. And then he appeared as a training hologram to AHSOKA. And then at the very end, he was one of the final images we saw, was a spirit of Anakin watching over AHSOKA as she was trapped on Peridia. So they're saying he's going to have a bigger role. Does that mean more flashbacks? I think so.
Yeah. I don't know if you're about to say the next one, but it's not just Hayden Christensen that is rumored to be showing up in AHSOKA. I think we all, at least I, no surprise that Hayden would return, not just because of the unfinished business they have starting, at the end of the series, but with all the fan love and fervor about seeing the Clone Wars in live action to some degree.
Yeah.
And so the other rumor is that Ewan McGregor will also appear in AHSOKA.
Right. Along with young AHSOKA, Ariana Greenblatt. So we've not seen the 3 of them on screen together. We only saw Hayden and Ariana playing young AHSOKA in the first season, but now they're going to drop in Ewan McGregor to really make the big 3 from the Clone Wars come together. And again, I would be thrilled if that spun off into a Clone Wars show, a live action Clone Wars show. Why not? There's still stories to be told, and it could easily be done. And you want to take advantage of Ariana Greenblatt's age and get her in there as young Ahsoka. So we might be seeing Hayden, Ariana, and Ewan coming together as Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan in Ahsoka Season 2. So that should be amazing. We have some other casting news.
I'll just say that let me give you my cynical take on this. Because one of my problems with the Ahsoka series was just that it was kind of boring. It was boring. There was a lot of people standing around talking with their arms folded. Not just Ahsoka, not just Rosario, but other ones as well. And so Filoni's getting this second chance. I think if he wasn't Dave Filoni, I don't know that we would be getting season 2 of Ahsoka, but he's getting it. He's got to make it click. He's got to make it work. And what better way? Because he's got a great relationship, I'm sure, with Hayden. So Hayden and Ewan are brothers from another mother. So getting them back on, getting them together with Ahsoka, giving the fans what they want, it's a no-brainer. But it's very strategic. It's very strategic, I think.
Well, for sure. Hey, listen, I'm just happy they have the foresight to recognize what's going on and know the potential that having a live action Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka flashbacks to the Clone Wars. I mean, that's a very valuable thing if you can pull it off. And I think they can.
They could be kicking the tires, Jim, on something more, something bigger with those three too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'd be fools not to. More Ahsoka casting news. We've been wondering about this ever since prior to season 1 when we learned that the great actor Ray Stevenson, who played Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka, passed away. And we were treated to a brilliant performance from him throughout season 1, but the character survived season 1. And his story seemed essential to the story Ahsoka was trying to tell. Ahsoka, the series, I should say, not the character. He seems essential to that story. And we had speculated maybe he'll be killed off screen. Maybe Shin Hati will find his body and then she'll take over his quest, whatever that quest may be, some sort of search for Mortis. I don't know. But it's being reported.
Talk about telling, not showing with that show. God.
Hollywood scooper Jeff Snyder is reporting Rory McCann, best known for playing the Hound on Game of Thrones, will be taking over the role of Baylan Skoll. And this has been verified via other sources as well. So I think
Disney has confirmed this now.
Oh, they have?
Yeah,
okay.
Disney has confirmed it. Yep.
What I've learned about actor Rory McCann, who I really am unfamiliar with, I am not a Game of Thrones fanboy. But what I discovered via my research of him was that he was actually a close friend of Ray Stevenson.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's really cool.
So there's a nice little symmetry there, and I dig it. And they say Ahsoka season 2 is rumored to start shooting in April. And they're not going to be shooting in California with the volume. They're going to be shooting in the UK. So I would expect a lot more...
Get those tax incentives.
Location shooting.
Get those
exactly. We know how that works. But I think at the end of the day, they're cheating themselves if they don't use the technology of the stagecraft volume and to create the virtual sets. I need to be specific about that because somebody asked me, what are you talking about with the volume? And it sounded like you were talking about the actual sets, but I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I think this person was thinking we were talking about volume as far as like sound levels go. Your more traditional usage of the term volume, turn the volume up, turn the volume down. He didn't understand how this connected with the virtual sets. So I had to write him a lengthy email explaining to him about what the stagecraft is. So I don't want to take our audience for granted and assume everyone knows all of this behind the scenes terminology we're using, but the volume is the thing that creates the virtual sets for shows like The Mandalorian. That was the show where this technology was introduced, and it was also used on AHSOKA Season 1 and Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. No, was it used on Kenobi? I think it was.
It was used on Kenobi, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's cool to know that Baylan Skoll and his quest for Mortis is going to continue in Season 2 of AHSOKA. So I'm totally down with that. We have some behind-the-scenes information here. This is something that you probably haven't heard on being rumored anywhere on the internet, but it's some information we got here at RFR. There is a shakeup happening at Lucasfilm's executive level, and there is a current live-action executive moving on from Lucasfilm. A replacement has already been hired, but not yet announced. This is a high-ranking executive at Lucasfilm who definitely has fingerprints all over live-action production. It's not Dave Filoni. I don't want anybody assuming it's Filoni. But it's someone up on that level for sure. So we should probably be hearing more about that soon. I have names. I'm not giving names. There's some things I got to keep to ourselves here at Rebel Force Radio. But also behind the scenes, we know that Stephen Knight was fired. He has departed.
He was relieved.
Well, he's departed as a writer of the Rey film that's to be directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. And he took over for Damon Lindelof, the guy who crafted shows like Lost and The Watchmen. He got bounced first. And so now we're on our third writer for this Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy Rey film. And there has been a new writer hired, but yet to be announced. It's a well-known name from what we've been told, but we don't know the name. And so things are progressing, I guess, again with the Rey film. But that's said to be still in development at Lucasfilm, the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy film, and they have a new writer for that. But we've also heard that Sean Levy has been rumored to be developing another film about Rey, and it almost seemed like there was a race for Rey going on. And Sean Levy has been working with his writing partner, and apparently they've come along so far that there's a rumor that Sean is keeping a window open in late summer, early fall, around September-ish, to shoot his Star Wars film, should it get the green light. But we're still in a holding pattern right now as far as that stuff goes for both Sean Levy and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's Rey films. But it looks like development is progressing as far as both of those projects go. So, my goodness. Of course, James Mangold, his Dawn of the Jedi film, that's also on the table. And they say that may start production in December, with shooting happening in early 2026. I'll believe it when I see it. James Mangold obviously has been out there promoting the Bob Dylan film. We also know he's attached to a film for DC about Swamp Thing. But all indications seem to be telling us that his Dawn of the Jedi film is going to be his next project. Who knows if it's going to be Lucasfilm's next project, though, because there seems to be a lot of uncertainty swirling around Lucasfilm as far as what's coming up next. I think a lot of things will be cleared with announcements at Star Wars Celebration Japan in April.
We do have a video clip of James. Do we want to go ahead and play that now while we're talking about it?
Sure, why not? As long as we're talking about James, he was out promoting the Bob Dylan film, A Complete Unknown, and he discussed his Star Wars film for about a minute while he was talking to MovieWeb. Here's what he had to say about jumping into the Star Wars universe.
To me, the two aspects that are really important is the freedom to make something new, which, Bo and I, in relation to Star Wars, have been working on a script, and we'll see what happens. And in relation to, like, Swamp Thing at DC, again, it's just a matter of do we find a way on the page to say something original? But part of the reason, the Star Wars movie would be taking place 25,000 years before any known Star Wars movies take place is because not only it's an area and a playground that I was inspired by as a teenager, but also I'm not that interested in being handcuffed by so much lore at this point that it's almost immovable and you can't please anybody.
It's hard to argue with that, Jim. I mean, I do think that great writers, great creative minds can work around those things. But if you're an established guy like James Mangold, you get to pick your projects. Do you really want that challenge? Do you really want to go through that spanking machine? So I think that there's no doubt that he's a talented guy and could do it. But I also, at the same time, respect him as a seasoned professional that, says, if I do this, I kind of want to do it my own way. And the best way to do it for me is to just go, 25,000 years before all of this and let me play a little bit. Again, hard to blame him.
He still might find he painted himself into a corner here,
even with
25,000
years. Is that not far enough back?
Star Wars lore does run deep, and its roots are ever expanding. And that's interesting. And I mean, there have been attempts to tell stories in the comic book realm about the earliest days of the Jedi, especially in the Dark Horse era. They had a few comic books, one in particular that was, I think it was called Dawn of the Jedi, and it really told the story about how the first people who discovered the Force, how they did it, and the mysteries surrounding all of that. So, but there's been much more mythology expanding that era, especially in The Last Jedi, when Luke goes to the original Jedi temple, and there's supposedly this mosaic of the first Jedi there in the temple. It's like a fountain. The tiles lining the fountain are supposed to be a display of the first ever Jedi. Whether or not any of that stuff really gets adhered to by a guy like James Mangold, we'll have to wait and see. But I think that project has a bit of potential, and I find myself becoming more and more interested in seeing what that could possibly be about. So I say bring on the Dawn of the Jedi, especially as you mentioned, James Mangold. He's a seasoned filmmaker and he's a storyteller, and I'm really interested to see what his take would be on those early days. But if you're gonna turn the clock back, you might as well do it with the live action series as well for streaming for Disney Plus. And there's a rumor out there saying that Knights of the Old Republic, that 2003 video game, we had heard that the guys from Game of Thrones, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, who were briefly with Lucasfilm, they were developing a live action series about Knights of the Old Republic. And there were reports a few years ago that said Leta Kalogridis, the screenwriter from Terminator Genesis and Alita Battle Angel, she had been hired in spring 2018 to write a film based on the video game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And it was said that she was close to completing the first script of a potential trilogy.
No.
And, Lucasfilm representatives didn't really comment on it at the time. Kathy Kennedy said that she was aware of the rumors. I remember this was at Star Wars Celebration in Chicago.
Knights of the Old Republic, a lot of fans want to see that. Is there any development of that?
We talk about that all the time. Yes, we are developing something to look at. Right now, I have no idea where things might fall.
This keeps coming up time and time again. Sooner or later, we are going to see a live action Knights. Maybe it'll be an animated show. I don't know. But we're going to see Knights of the Old Republic, that video game and that story get expanded upon via a series. That's been bubbling up under the surface for
Now,
a while.
there's one thing that you haven't mentioned in all of these rumors. We're talking about films, we're talking about live action, but I don't hear you talking about animation. Other than you dropped the possibility of a Visions 3, but
there's
is
stuff
there
being worked on.
anything percolating there that you're aware of?
Well, the word is there's 2 yet to be announced animated series that are beyond development. They're currently in production.
Mm.
And you'd have to believe, something's cooking over there as far as the animation arm goes for Star Wars. Something's cooking. And I wouldn't be surprised if something dropped, at the end of 2025, early 2026. Again, wait for Star Wars Celebration Japan for announcements like that. But I think they're probably pretty far along in whatever the next series is going to be.
I would think they'd want something for the holiday season on Disney Plus. Something, because Andor is going to wrap up this summer, and AHSOKA won't be ready until next year. So, that precious time when you want to take advantage of people being home, I think that really helped Skeleton Crew. I do, at the end of the day. I think there were a lot of people home enjoying the holiday break. So to me, that just seems like a ripe time to have something. Now, they haven't always done it. Was it last year that we kind of got the holidays off, or was it the year before? I can't wait. I can't forget. I can't remember. I keep losing track. But there was one year where we were like, wow, we don't have after shows to do.
I think it was last year.
It was last year.
Yeah,
okay.
2023.
Yeah.
Whatever. I did enjoy having Skeleton Crew around for the holiday season this year.
Me too.
And I got to say, I just love Skeleton Crew. I really do. I think those guys hit an absolute home run with that series, and it was just so good in so many different ways. Do I consider it like the apex of perfect Star Wars? No, I don't. But also, there weren't any real obvious flaws with it either. It stuck to the story it was telling. It stayed in its lane. It stayed focused on the story it was telling, and it was loaded up with an outstanding cast and outstanding directors. And that's the type of stuff we need more from Star Wars. As long as they do exactly what they say they're going to do with the series. They did exactly what they said they were going to do with Skeleton Crew. A story
I like the way you put it about staying in your lane. And, one thing that, in the moment, I'll admit I thought it was really, really cool, but I feel like when Acolyte put that Darth Plagueis cameo in there, that was an example of them not staying in their lane, because all it was just a quick, cheap Easter egg. And I feel like that character is too important in the history of Star Wars to just, throw a bone to like that. So again, in the moment, thought it was cool. We talked about it. Wow, Plagueis. But now we're left with no more Acolyte, and they're not going to be following up on that. So you're right when you use that expression. Stay in your lane. Just do what you're mandated to do, what you set out to do. And once you've proven yourself, then spread out a little bit.
Right, like the Mandalorian, essentially.
For sure.
The Mandalorian stayed in its lane for its first season. Then the second season, it started to expand to include all of these pre-existing characters and storylines. And then by season 3, it basically became another season of Star Wars Rebels or whatever, with the whole focus on the Mandalorians and Bo-Katan and all of that,
Right.
One final live action casting rumor we have is for the Mandalorian and Grogu. And I believe this has been all but confirmed. I think it's been verified by many sources, but Embo the bounty hunter from Clone Wars is rumored to be the main villain in the Mandalorian and Grogu. Main villain specifically. From what we understand, the story is going to be about Rada the Hutt once again, getting kidnapped or something, and he needs to be saved. And the New Republic hires the Mandalorian to go save Rada the Hutt, and Embo will be his prime competition for that mission.
We all remember
working
Embo.
against
I think he didn't he ski down a mountain on his own hat.
Yes, he did. Also, I want to point out, voiced by Dave Filoni. He's a character voiced by Dave Filoni. So,
maybe Dave's dealing with some budget cuts, and he's going to have to not only, executive produce with Jon Favreau. He's going to have to get in there and do some. You got to earn your keep around here, Filoni. You got to do some voice acting.
Well, I don't know what kind of cuts in the budget are going on if they're hiring a guy like Jeremy Allen White to voice Rada the Hutt.
Yeah,
that's
true.
They obviously have to pay a lot. They have to pay him a lot more than they'd have to pay like Skywalker Sound's David Acord to recreate his goops and gops. But so that's the thing. I thought Embo was a pretty cool character in Clone Wars, and I would like to see him being brought on as a live action character. I have no hang.
I saw some belly aching about this and whatnot, but
yeah,
when I read it, I was like, okay, all right, it's Embo. I mean, once they threw out Rada the Hutt, anything they say now at this point, I'm just going to be like, all right, I'll roll with it. What am I going to do? It's hard for me to imagine that Favreau is going to throw something at us that he can't make work. I think Favreau's been doing this long enough with Star Wars. He knows what works and what doesn't. Gets a little indulgent with some of his stunt casting, I'll say that. But in terms of the big ideas, I think John knows what he's doing. And, at one point, Jim, here's what's kind of funny about this. If someone would have said, hey, we're going to give you a Bosk show, or we're going to get Bosk in here, or Dengar, we'd have been like, yeah, the original bounty hunters, but, it's Embo, and we're like, what's going on with this Embo? Come on, he's a cool bounty hunter, and just strap in and see what happens, Well, who are you expecting to be the main villain of the Mando film? Palpatine? Somehow Palpatine's returned?
Darth Maul again?
Darth Maul. Yeah. The spirit of Darth Vader. They got to go in it. They got to go in a different direction. Now, you could make the case, couldn't they make someone brand new? Someone brand new we haven't seen, we haven't heard of. Yeah, they probably could, and then people would have said, why'd they create a new character when Star Wars is so rich with characters we haven't seen enough of? It's a
lose-lose.
It's a tough spot for these guys. But this didn't turn me off. I'll just put it that way. I didn't read this news and go, oh, that's it for me. I'm out. I'm not seeing this.
Yeah. So, curious to see how it all plays out. I did give some of season 3 of The Mandalorian a little love during the holiday break, and something that really needs to be amplified a little bit is that at the end of season 3, it really appears like the Mandalorian hangs up his bounty hunter guild membership. I don't think he's accepting bounties anymore. He makes himself available to Carson Teva should the New Republic be looking for an independent contractor for any reason. So I don't think that the Mandalorian will be featured as a bounty hunter in the film. I really think that he's going to be more connected to the New Republic and probably have a counterpart like Zeb join him on this adventure, and maybe some other familiar faces as well.
It could be such that the New Republic has to recruit a guy like Din Djarin because there's bounty hunters causing trouble, maybe for the New Republic in some way. And they're like, we need a guy that understands this world of bounty hunters, and they know they've got somebody like Mando. So I could see that happening.
Right. So, can't wait for all of these projects to come to fruition. It's so great to get such a huge batch of awesome rumors. Some of them actually have some legitimacy to them, some real legitimacy. So looking forward to seeing how that all plays out. I'd like to jump to a tribute if I can, because I think we're starting to run a little short of time.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Angus MacInnes, who passed away over the holidays. Angus MacInnes from Canada. He is an actor who appeared in A New Hope. He was Gold Leader, Dutch Vander. And he was there with all the X-Wing pilots. He's one of these classic characters from Star Wars. He's a guy who's been very active on the convention circuit, signing autographs for fans and everything. And I put together a little montage of his highlights from A New Hope, specifically during the trench run. So maybe you've never seen all of Gold Leader's particular scenes all stitched together. It almost creates a sub-story in itself. So go ahead and give it a spin. Here's the best of Dutch Vander, Angus MacInnes, Gold Leader.
Red Leader, this is Gold Leader. We're starting our attack run. The exhaust port is marked and locked in. Switch all power to front deflector screen. Switch all power to front deflector screen. How many guns do you think, Gold 5? Switch to targeting computer. 3 marks at 210. Oh, good, I can't maneuver.
Stay on target.
We're too close.
Stay on target.
Loosen up.
And that's it.
That's it. If I'm not mistaken, was it Gold Leader Angus MacInnes that Billy Mack waited in line for quite a long time for at I think it's Celebration Chicago? It was to get his autograph.
this was like Celebration 2 in Indianapolis. This was right after Richard LaParmentier yelled at him and yelled at us.
Okay.
Mad.
Just an ID.
You know what? It's a station ID.
Yeah, just a station ID. 3 lines.
No, you know what? I cannot do that. Because my line, this is now the most powerful station, battle station in the universe, is being used as a slug line.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yes. And you know what? And guess who hasn't been paid?
We don't really That's disrespectful.
Exactly. So I can't do it.
He called us effing mad. And so then Billy rolled up on Angus MacInnes because Billy grew up a huge fan of SCTV, as we all did in the early 80s. And Angus MacInnes appeared in the movie spin-off of SCTV, Strange Brew, featuring Bob and Doug McKenzie, the hosers. Take off, eh?
Yeah.
Remember, they had their own film. Right. And Angus MacInnes appears in that film as Rosie the Rose. I think he was a former Toronto Maple Leaf who ended up working at a brewery that the Bob and Doug went to complain. They wanted their money back for a case of beer because they found a mouse in one of the bottles. And I'm pretty sure it was Doug who jammed the mouse into the bottle. But
God, I have not seen Strange Brew in probably 30 years.
It's streaming, and it's pretty funny to watch in 2024, I will say. But
Rick Moranis and Thomas, Dave Thomas, or not Dave Thomas? Yeah, Dave Thomas. Yeah,
Dave Thomas, a couple of comic geniuses, and they were Bob and Doug McKenzie. Good day, eh? And so really fun to see Angus MacInnes in that film. We have a little interview clip of Angus talking about his association with Star Wars and how he was never a guy who really sought the spotlight as far as his acting career went, but it seems like he was pretty proud of his involvement with Star Wars. So check this out.
I look around and I see a lot of celebrity culture going on, and I look at that and I go, well, actually, I was in a really major movie. But I don't want to be a celebrity. I'm not interested in that. But it's got a really odd resonance, you know, when you sort of look back at a career and that, I mean, I've never been a star and I never wanted to be one. I'm just a supporting actor. That's my job. But knowing that you're part of something like that has got a nice resonance to it inside. It feels nice. It feels, yeah. I mean, I've done other pictures that I'm very proud of, and I've worked with directors that I've loved working with in a purely creative way. But Star Wars is something that sort of transcends that. It was a good movie as a movie, but it also has this sort of social bell that rings. And, yeah, it's good. And I think there is something to be said to be aware of the dark side, you know, especially these days. Anyway, a lot of dark side going on.
Well, Gold Leader, yeah, that's seems like a pretty grounded dude. You know, it's so many times, Jim, we'll lose somebody like that, and we'll play these interview clips, and I'll go, "Oh man, I wish I'd have met him." You know, I wish I would have had a moment with them, and you know, and they're gone. But it's, you know, it's good to remember them and celebrate the contribution that they made to this thing that we love so much. But yeah, it's always a little bittersweet, especially when it's somebody that I hadn't had a chance to, you know, meet or, you know, tell them, you know, how much I appreciate what they did.
For sure. I mean, we've talked to hundreds of Star Wars actors and notable personalities, but we never did have the chance to talk to Angus MacInnes. And I think we would have been thick as thieves with the guy, just judging from that clip alone and some other clips I've seen of him. One of my favorite clips of his is this rare video that was screened one time and one time only at one of the Star Wars Celebration events. It's a Gold Leader blooper.
We're starting for the target shaft now. Cadets, stand by to take over if anything goes wrong. We're starting our attack run. Oh, fuck, I'm sorry.
Drop the big F-bomb there. Second unit director was probably
you know, if it's
frosted by that.
if it's an F-bomb by either F.J. DeSanto or a Star Wars actor who has passed, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
It doesn't count. So we're going to let that one go.
It doesn't get bleeped. We did not bleep that particular F-bomb out of respect.
Yes.
Okay. So, and one other loss, not really directly connected to Star Wars, but this week a legend passed away, the great director David Lynch. You know, David Lynch.
Gosh, that came out of the blue. I was that was shocking. I didn't know he was ill. I don't know if he was ill. He's 79, I believe, which, you know, that doesn't seem that old to me.
No, especially the closer you get to 79.
Right.
Every year.
But he was one of those names and one of those fixtures that's just always been there, you know, David Lynch. And I can't say, oh, I'm a big David Lynch fan and I celebrate his whole, body of work. But, you know, he was just always around and always kind of pushing the boundaries on things and, you know, a great artist.
He directed so many notable films. I mean, of course, Twin Peaks has a massive cult audience that supports that. He directed Eraserhead, which was an amazing early film of his, and Mulholland Drive. I mean, his resume is a mile long, and it caught the attention of young George Lucas as he was preparing to shoot Return of the Jedi. And realizing that Irv Kershner was not going to come back, George started thinking about other directors, and David Lynch actually landed on George Lucas's radar. And he took meetings with David to try to convince him to join the Star Wars franchise as a director. But David eventually turned down the directing job for Return of the Jedi, and I have a nice audio clip here of David Lynch explaining to a crowd, an audience somewhere, about that whole experience of meeting with George Lucas and getting the opportunity to direct Star Wars and why he eventually turned it down.
I was asked by George to come up to see him and talk to him about directing, which would be the third Star Wars. And I had next door to zero interest. But I always admired George. You know, George is a guy that does what he loves, and I do what I love. The difference is what George loves makes hundreds of billions of dollars. So I thought I should go up and at least visit with him. And it was incredible. I had to go to this building in L.A. first and get a special credit card, and I had to get special keys, and a letter came and a map. And then I went into the airport, and I flew up, and then they had a rental car all ready for me, and this keys, and everything was set, and I was to drive to this place, and I came into an office, and there was George. And he talked with me for a little bit, and then he said, I want to show you something. Now, right about in this time, I started getting a little bit of a headache. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. So he took me upstairs, and he showed me these things called Wookiees. And now this headache is getting stronger. And he showed me many animals and different things. Then he took me for a ride in his Ferrari for a lunch. And George is kind of short, so his seat was way back, and he was almost laying down in the car. We were flying through this little town up in Northern California. We went to a restaurant. Not that I don't like salad, but that's all they had was salad. Then I got a really almost like a migraine headache, and I could hardly wait to get to home. And even before I got home, I kind of crawled into a phone booth and phoned my agent. I said, there's no way, I know no way I can do this. He said, David, calm down. You don't have to do this. And so George, bless his heart, I told him on the phone the next day that he should direct it. It's his film. He invented everything about it. But he doesn't really love directing. And so someone else did direct that film. But I called my lawyer and told him that I wasn't going to do it. And he said, you just lost, I don't know how many millions of dollars. But it's okay.
That's what he tells himself.
Yeah. Another guy that who's known for being a little out there and pushing limits. But what I love and respect about that clip is David Lynch is one of those guys that, despite the money that was being dangled, the possibility, he knew who he was and he knew who he wasn't. And you got to know yourself. You got to know what you're good at, what you're not good at. And it sounded like he was having a physical reaction to the idea of doing something like this. And he made the right call. And but it's a really fun, little interesting what if piece of Star Wars history for sure.
Yeah. The ability to recognize the anxiety that's welling up inside of you, even though you're being offered this incredible opportunity. And as a professional director, he had to have his ears wide open when it comes to Star Wars. I mean, he obviously took the meeting and everything, but the headaches, the pounding headaches, and that's just in the initial meeting.
Right.
He had the wherewithal, the self-awareness to recognize those warning signs early on. And he came to the realization it's only going to become more and more amplified should he continue with this.
Right.
And so right away, so he knew it wasn't for him.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the best ways you can manage your own personal mental health. I don't want to make this about me, but I was presented with an opportunity a couple of months ago that is kind of like, it would be considered a bucket list thing for a Star Wars fan to do. But it required an awful lot of travel. And despite my initial positive reaction to the opportunity, I quickly realized that there was a whole heap of anxiety boiling up inside of me about it. And the event is 14 months away from now.
Yeah.
And so I just thought to myself, oh my God, I can't even live with myself with this anxiety anticipating this event, much less doing it. So I bailed. And I think, it's that sort of self-awareness that you need to have to be able to manage your own mental health. And if something is really getting to you under your skin from the very first moment, then you should listen to your gut.
If you can cut it out of your life, do it. because there's nothing, we were talking about the Q&A with Jeff Holland. There's nothing that is worth sacrificing your health for. Nothing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have your health, you got nothing.
And David Lynch, R.I.P.
Yes.
He probably, he was probably with us a lot longer than he would have been had he accepted the directorial job for Return of the Jedi. I mean, obviously we know Richard Mark. I don't want to get flippin' morbid, I don't want to get so morbid. Yikes.
That's a hell of a way to end it, but I mean, hey, facts are facts, and they don't always care about your feelings. R.I.P. David Lynch and Angus MacInnes. But long live Rebel Force Radio and Star Wars fans everywhere. Thank you all so much for tuning in this week. It is so good to be back and just shooting the breeze about Star Wars once again. Love the after shows, love the interaction, but it's also wonderful just to kind of, do the whole Star Wars, etc. Star Wars, not just Skeleton Crew, not just looking at one particular thing, and enjoying our little Star Wars celebration each and every week here on Rebel Force Radio. So thanks so much for tuning in. If you want more Rebel Force Radio in your life, we were telling you about Patreon. That's the best place to get it. Go over to patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Super easy. If you're intimidated by it or like, I don't understand what this is about, very, very simple. You just pay a little bit per month, whatever you're comfortable with. There's multiple tiers, and it unlocks various benefits. And those benefits range from everything from podcasts that are exclusive to Patreon supporters all the way up to co-hosting a show with Jimmy Mack. I mean, so there's a whole range of opportunities there. So whatever you can do. Those exclusive podcasts are pretty entry level. So we don't bury those at the end at the highest level. All Access will get you the video of the weekly Rebel Force Radio podcast. So if you found us through the after shows and you're used to looking at our faces, maybe you're like, I don't know, I kind of miss looking at these guys. You can become an All Access member and you can watch the video of the Rebel Force Radio podcast. And I will say this, I'm going to give Jimmy a plug here. He adds all kinds of bells and whistles to the final audio output of the podcast. So have you really experienced the weekly RFR if you haven't done both the actual podcast and the video? So I put it out to you because it is a different experience. Speaking of video, we're also available on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the videos that you watch. When you hear us talking about guys like Angus MacInnes, no, we don't have an interview with Angus, but we do have interviews with a lot of Star Wars alum, celebrities, and all that. And that's our podcast adventures have gone on many, 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 many years, and that's all archived, so much of it on YouTube. You can also keep up with us on our socials, Facebook, X, Instagram. Jim, I think you've also started to put us out there on some of the newer platforms. Blue Sky, I think, is one of them.
We got Blue Sky, we got Threads, we got Insta. You won't find much of us on TikTok, but I don't know how long TikTok's going to be around. Some tells me TikTok will persevere, but
right now the clock is ticking on TikTok here in the United States. That's for sure.
Maybe.
One place you can find us always and all the time is on rebelforceradio.com, the official website. But if you really want to help us out, the best thing you can do, it's just like the recommendation we had when it comes to letting Lucasfilm know that you like Skeleton Crew. Let us know you like us by listening to the podcast. Keep doing what you're doing right now and recommending it to your friends and family, the Star Wars fans in your life. Tell them that Rebel Force Radio is their source for the Force too. They just might not know it. They might not know it. So it helps the show grow, and that blesses all of us. So please subscribe if you can. Recommend it to a friend. If your podcatcher of choice allows you to do so, please leave us a review. We love to have those reviews. We do our best to read them all. Just one simple rule on those.
Make them good.
Now do it for us this week here on Rebel Force Radio. We will be back next week for more Star Wars news. Anything that we didn't get to that was on the old rundown, we'll get to it next week. Fear not. So we'll see you next time for Rebel Force Radio. I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
Mad.